I always thought wisdom came with age, that I was the one protecting my granddaughter, guiding her, teaching her. But that belief shattered the day my son boarded his flight. We stood at the airport, waving as the plane disappeared into the clouds. Everyone around us carried on as if it were an ordinary morning. But the moment the plane took off, my granddaughter's small hand gripped mine tightly. Her face turned pale, her eyes wide with a fear no child should carry. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We have to leave. Right now." The urgency in her voice sent chills through me. She wasn't playing. She wasn't imagining things. She knew something we didn't. In that instant, I made a choice, one that would lead us into secrets, danger, and a truth that would change our family forever. Because sometimes, children see the monsters we've learned to ignore. My name is Margaret, though everyone calls me Grandma Maggie. My life has never been perfect, but it has always been full of love. My son, Daniel, was my pride, hardworking, ambitious, the kind of man who carried the weight of his family on his shoulders. And then there was my granddaughter, Emma, a bright little soul with eyes that always seemed older than her years. Since my husband and I had retired, we spent most of our days helping Daniel take care of Emma. Her mother had passed away when she was very young, and Emma often clung to me as though I was both grandmother and mother. I didn't mind. I adored her. That morning started like any other. Daniel was flying out on another business trip. He'd been traveling more often lately, though he brushed off my worries with a smile and a kiss on the cheek. "Just another meeting, Mom. Nothing to worry about." At the time, I believed him. But little did I know, that morning would be the last time I looked at my son with blind trust, because everything that followed, every tear, every fear, began the moment his flight took off. The sun had barely risen when Daniel wheeled his suitcase into the kitchen. Emma sat at the table, swinging her legs while eating toast, her favorite strawberry jam smeared across her lips. She looked cheerful enough, but there was something different in her eyes, something heavy. "Big day, kiddo," Daniel said, kissing her forehead. "I'll be back before you know it." She gave a small nod but didn't smile. I noticed the way she clutched the edge of her chair, her knuckles white. As Daniel and I chatted about flight times and schedules, I kept glancing at Emma. She was unusually quiet, and my grandmother's instinct told me something was off, but I brushed it aside, thinking she was just sad her father was leaving again. Children often feel things more deeply than they can say, I reminded myself. I didn't know then that Emma wasn't just sad. She was scared. And soon, I would understand why. Airports always made me anxious. The crowds, the rush, the constant announcements echoing overhead, it was too much noise for my old soul. But Emma held my hand tightly as we followed Daniel to the gate, her little fingers pressing into my palm like she was anchoring herself to me. Daniel was calm, almost cheerful, cracking jokes to keep the mood light. He hugged me quickly, promised to call when he landed, then crouched to Emma's level. "You're my brave girl, okay? Look after Grandma and Grandpa." Emma didn't answer. She only stared at him, her lips pressed tightly together. Daniel laughed nervously, ruffled her hair, and walked toward the gate. We stood by the large glass windows, watching as his plane rolled down the runway. Emma's grip on my hand grew tighter with each passing second. When the plane lifted off the ground, Emma's face went pale. Her lips parted, and what she whispered next sent shivers down my spine. "Grandma," she said, her voice trembling, "we need to leave. Right now." Her words hit me like ice water. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I asked softly. Her eyes darted around the terminal, wide and filled with fear. "We can't stay here. Please, Grandma. We have to go." This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't the impatience of a child who wanted to go home. It was something deeper, raw, urgent fear. I exchanged a quick glance with my husband, who raised his brows in confusion. But when Emma tugged at my arm, practically pulling me toward the exit, I realized this wasn't something we could ignore. I didn't understand it then, but I felt it in my bones. Emma knew something. Something she wasn't supposed to know. Every instinct in me screamed to stay calm, to reassure Emma, to explain logically that nothing was wrong. But her eyes, those terrified eyes, made my heart race. "All right," I said gently, crouching to her level. "If you want us to leave, we'll leave." The relief that washed over her face was almost immediate. She grabbed my hand and nearly dragged me toward the exit. My husband followed, bewildered but trusting. As we stepped out of the airport doors into the cool morning air, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling crawling through me. Why was Emma so desperate? Why the urgency the moment Daniel's plane disappeared into the sky? I didn't have the answers. Not yet. But the truth would come, and it would change everything. On the drive home, Emma refused to speak. She sat in the back seat, hugging her backpack to her chest, her small frame trembling as though she was cold, even though the sun was warming the car. I tried asking her what frightened her so badly, but she only shook her head. "You wouldn't believe me," she whispered. The words cut through me. What could an 8-year-old possibly say that I wouldn't believe? I reached back, placing my hand gently on hers. "Sweetheart, I'll always believe you, no matter what." But she only stared out the window, silent, as if guarding a secret too big for her young heart to carry, and that silence haunted me all the way home. That evening, after tucking Emma into bed, I lingered in her room. She clutched a small notebook, refusing to let it go even as she drifted toward sleep. "Emma," I whispered softly. "What's in the notebook?" Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer, but then she whispered, barely audible, "It's why we had to leave." My chest tightened. My hands itched to open the notebook right then and there, but she hugged it tighter to her chest. "Not yet, Grandma." "You'll see soon." I kissed her forehead, though my mind was already racing. What could my granddaughter possibly know that made her beg us to run the moment her father's flight took off? I didn't know then that the notebook held the first piece of a puzzle we weren't ready to solve. The next morning, Emma woke before anyone else. I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her notebook open, though she quickly shut it when she saw me. Her face looked pale, her eyes shadowed as if she hadn't slept at all. "Grandma," she whispered, "promise you won't let them find us." Her words froze me. "Who, Emma? Who's trying to find us?" She shook her head, lips pressed tightly, and refused to answer. All day she stayed close by, flinching at the sound of cars pulling into the driveway or footsteps outside. It wasn't the behavior of a child. It was the behavior of someone who knew she was being hunted. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking, but deep down I knew. Emma wasn't imagining things. Something, or someone, was out there. That evening, as my husband and I cleared the dinner table, Emma suddenly stiffened. "They're here," she whispered. I followed her gaze to the window. At first I saw nothing, just the dim outline of our porch, but then I noticed it. A shadow lingering just beyond the glass, unmoving. My heart pounded. My husband went to open the door, but Emma cried out, "No!" "Don't!" The shadow disappeared before he could reach the handle, leaving nothing but the empty night. My husband muttered that it was probably just a neighbor, but I saw the look in Emma's eyes. Wide, terrified, certain. She wasn't just guessing. She knew. That night, Emma refused to sleep in her own room. She curled up between my husband and me, clutching her notebook to her chest like it was a life preserver. Every creak of the house made her flinch. When the wind rattled the shutters, she buried her face in my arm. At one point, she whispered, "If we stay here, they'll come. They'll take us away." Her words chilled me. I wanted to press for details, but she squeezed her eyes shut, trembling, and I couldn't bear to push her further. Instead, I lay awake, staring into the darkness, wondering what secret my granddaughter was carrying. What had she seen or overheard that made her believe danger was chasing us? The following afternoon, Emma finally let me glimpse inside her notebook. Pages filled with drawings and shaky handwriting spilled out. Men in dark coats, planes, and cryptic words like "don't trust," "followed," and "secret papers." I swallowed hard. This wasn't the imagination of a child scribbling monsters. These were details. Specific, deliberate, and frighteningly real. "Emma, sweetheart," I asked carefully, "where did you see this?" Her eyes darted around nervously. "I heard Daddy talking on the phone." He thought I was asleep, but I wasn't. She closed the book quickly, her hands trembling. "Grandma, they know about us now?" The pit in my stomach deepened. Whatever my son had gotten involved in, it was no longer just his problem. It was ours too. 2 days later, I noticed a black car parked across the street. It didn't belong to any neighbor. The engine idled, the windows tinted too dark to see inside. Emma spotted it too. Her small hand slipped into mine, clammy with fear. "I told you," she whispered. "They're watching us." When I looked again an hour later, the car was gone. But I knew it would be back. My husband tried to calm us, insisting it was a coincidence. But Emma shook her head. "It's them. They're waiting for Daddy to call. Her certainty terrified me more than the car itself. Because if she was right, then the danger wasn't just near. It was already here. That night, Emma woke us up around midnight, shaking me violently. "Grandma, we have to go, now!" Before I could ask why, I heard it too. The crunch of tires on our gravel driveway, slow and deliberate. My husband peeked through the curtains and swore under his breath. Headlights beamed across the lawn, blinding and still. Without hesitation, Emma grabbed her backpack, already packed. My heart raced, but I trusted her urgency. We slipped out the back door, moving through the dark toward the woods that lined our property. Every step felt like borrowed time. Behind us, the sound of car doors slamming echoed like gunshots in the night. Emma had saved us again. We didn't stop running until we reached an old storage shed deep in the trees. My husband and I were breathless, but Emma stood firm, clutching her notebook. "This is why," she whispered, opening it again. Inside was a folded piece of paper, one I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't a drawing. It was a document. A real one. It had my son's handwriting on it, along with names, dates, and what looked like codes. My stomach flipped. This wasn't a child's fantasy. Emma's voice was quiet, but steady. Daddy said if they found this, they'd hurt us. That's why we had to leave. For the first time, I understood. My granddaughter wasn't just frightened. She was carrying the very secret that men were willing to chase us for. And it was only the beginning. As we hid in the shed, Emma clutched her notebook tightly, her small fingers tracing the scribbled words. "I overheard it, Grandma," she whispered. Her eyes filled with tears. I wasn't supposed to, but I was awake that night. She recounted the memory in fragments. Her father on the phone, his voice low and tense. "It has to be tonight," he had said. "No mistakes. If they get this, everything is ruined." Emma's lips trembled as she remembered the hurried footsteps, the rustling papers, and the sharp tone of a man warning Daniel to be careful. I realized then that my son's life was far more complicated than we had imagined. He wasn't just leaving for a business trip. He was caught up in something dangerous, something he hadn't told us about. Emma's clarity, her ability to remember details we might have overlooked, made my heart pound. She was the only reason we were even aware of the threat. I leaned closer to her notebook. Among her childish sketches, there were words that made my blood run cold. "Follow instructions. Do not tell. Keep away." "What do these mean, Emma?" I asked gently. "I don't know exactly," she admitted, "but I saw Daddy hiding papers in his desk, and the men he was talking to, they were not nice. They looked dangerous. They said we can't leave." Her eyes searched mine for understanding. I felt the weight of her fear, the seriousness behind her words. It was no longer a guessing game. Whoever was after Daniel's secret could harm us if we stayed. And Emma had sensed it all along. I began piecing the puzzle together. Daniel's increasing travel, his hushed phone calls, the papers Emma had seen, everything pointed to a life he had kept hidden. I realized we had been naive. We thought we knew him, thought we could trust the ordinary image he projected. But the danger he was involved in had quietly crept into our lives without warning. Emma's intuition had been right. She had seen the patterns adults overlooked, the visitors, the hurried movements, the fear in my son's eyes even when he smiled. This child had the clarity of survival instincts far beyond her years, and now we had to act on it. We examined the paper Emma had found in her notebook. It was a coded message, one that could only be interpreted by someone who knew the context. I took a deep breath. "Emma, do you remember where Daddy hid this?" "Yes," she whispered. "In the bottom drawer of his desk?" "Under the false panel." With trembling hands, I retrieved the papers. They were documents detailing financial transfers, coded names, and instructions that clearly weren't meant for ordinary business dealings. It was dangerous. It was real. And it explained why Emma had begged us to leave the moment the plane took off. As I studied the documents, a horrifying thought struck me. Whoever wanted these papers wouldn't stop at Daniel. They would come for us too. Emma had been right from the start. Her instinct had saved us. She wasn't overreacting. She was protecting the entire family. I felt a surge of gratitude toward her, mixed with fear. The world was more dangerous than we realized, and we were in the eye of a storm we barely understood. It was time to plan. We couldn't run blindly. We had to understand what we were up against and prepare for what was coming next. That evening, I called my husband over. "He's hiding more than just work stress," I said quietly, showing him the papers. His face paled as he examined the documents. "This isn't just business. Daniel is involved with people who could ruin him, or worse. And if they find these, they could ruin us too. The weight of the situation hit us both. Our son, the boy we had raised, was living a life that endangered the entire family. I realized that Daniel's secrecy, once thought harmless, had put us all in jeopardy. Emma's courage had bought us time, but time was running out. By nightfall, we knew we had to act. Emma stayed awake, vigilant, her instincts guiding us. We packed essentials, made plans to move to a safe location, and organized the documents in case they were needed as proof. Every creak outside the shed, every shadow on the walls, reminded us of the danger lurking just beyond our reach. Emma, small but determined, had become our guide through this hidden world, and I knew, as I held her hand tightly, that her warnings were the first line of defense in a battle we weren't ready for, but that we had to face. The secrets were out, and there was no turning back. The next morning, as we cautiously peeked outside the shed, we saw a black SUV parked a short distance away. 2 men in dark clothing lingered near it, eyes scanning the surroundings. Emma clutched my hand tightly. "Grandma, they're here," she whispered. My husband and I exchanged a worried glance. The danger we had sensed was real. Whoever was after Daniel's documents had tracked us down, and they weren't leaving without a fight. We decided immediately. We couldn't stay another minute. The shed offered temporary concealment, but no long-term safety. Emma's intuition had never failed her before, and I knew this was no exception. We needed a plan, and fast. My husband and I gathered essentials, phones, the documents, and some clothes. Emma stayed close, her small hand wrapped tightly in mine. I whispered to her, "Can you lead us safely out?" She nodded without hesitation. Her eyes, wide and serious, scanned every direction. "This way," she said, pointing to a hidden path through the woods behind our property. We moved quietly, our footsteps muffled by leaves and underbrush. Every snap of a twig or rustle of the wind made our hearts leap. Emma paused at times, peering back, ensuring no one followed. It was clear she wasn't just a child in danger. She was our guide, our protector. Halfway through the forested path, we heard the crunch of tires on gravel. The SUV had followed us. Panic surged through me. "Quick, through the stream!" Emma commanded, pointing to a narrow waterway hidden behind the trees. We waded through the cold water, barely making a sound. The SUV slowed, then turned around. Whoever had been following us wasn't ready to give up, but Emma's foresight had given us precious time. My husband shook his head in disbelief. "This kid, she's saving us," I could only nod. Her instinct, her courage, had turned the tide. After what felt like hours, we reached a small, abandoned cabin deep in the woods. It wasn't much, but it offered shelter and, most importantly, privacy. Inside, Emma finally relaxed enough to sit, though she still hugged her notebook tightly. We barricaded the door and windows with whatever we could find. As I looked at her, I realized that my granddaughter had become the unexpected hero of our story. Without her, we might have walked straight into danger. Her small frame held a strength far beyond her years, and I silently vowed we would protect her at all costs. That night, I carefully examined the documents Emma had found. Names, dates, coded instructions, all pointed to Daniel's dealings with dangerous individuals. The revelation hit me hard. My son had been hiding a life of secrets and potential criminal entanglements. Whoever was pursuing us wasn't just interested in the papers. They wanted leverage, control, maybe even revenge. Emma's warnings were prophetic. Her instincts had been guiding us toward safety long before we realized the depth of the danger. At dawn, we saw movement outside the cabin. The same black SUV had returned, and the men approached cautiously. My husband whispered, "We can't fight them." Emma, however, didn't panic. "We wait," she instructed, pointing to a hidden escape route behind the cabin. The men lingered, scanning the area. Then, using the knowledge Emma had memorized about our surroundings, we slipped out unseen, moving through a path only she had noticed. Her intuition had once again guided us, and we were free. For now. By midday, we reached a safe house a trusted family friend had offered. For the first time in days, we felt some relief. Emma finally allowed herself to sit, exhausted but triumphant. "We made it," I said softly. She smiled faintly. "We just have to stay smart." I realized that survival was no longer just about running, it was about vigilance, trust, and listening to the wisdom of a child who saw the danger adults had ignored. And in that moment, I knew our fight wasn't over, but at least we had won the first round. The safe house was modest, hidden on the outskirts of town, but it offered the first sense of security we had felt in days. Emma immediately curled up on a small couch with her notebook, her fingers tracing the familiar words and drawings as if they were a lifeline. I sat beside her, exhausted but relieved. My husband paced quietly, speaking in low tones on the phone to ensure no one knew our location. For the first time we could breathe, but the tension remained. I realized how fragile our sense of normalcy had been. One moment we were living ordinary lives. The next, we were running for our safety based on a child's instinct. And yet, it was that instinct that had saved us. That evening, I finally spoke to Emma. "You were right," I said, holding her small hands. "If we hadn't listened to you, who knows what could have happened?" Her eyes widened, a mixture of pride and lingering fear. "I just knew," she whispered. "I didn't want anything to happen to us." For the first time, she smiled, a fragile but genuine expression. I realized that sometimes children see truths adults ignore. Her bravery had guided us through darkness and uncertainty. The next days were filled with calls and careful investigation. We learned that Daniel had indeed been involved in dealings far more complicated than he had revealed. While his intentions had been to protect the family in his own way, secrecy had placed us in unimaginable danger. We spoke openly about his actions with Emma, carefully explaining the risks and why she had been right to trust her instincts. Though it was difficult, she began to understand the adult world in ways no child should have to. Life in the safe house forced us to rely on one another in ways we hadn't before. Every meal prepared, every quiet conversation, every bedtime story became a reminder that we were still together, and that unity mattered more than fear. Emma slowly began to relax, drawing and writing in her notebook without anxiety. My husband and I, too, found a measure of peace in knowing that our vigilance had kept her safe. Weeks passed, and the danger receded. We eventually returned home under the careful protection of authorities. The streets, the house, even the familiar sounds, all felt different now. But we were alive, intact, and more connected than ever. Emma walked through the front door first, her hand tightly gripping mine. "We're safe now," she said softly, and for once, it felt true. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that life is fragile, and danger can emerge when least expected. But trust, courage, and intuition can guide us safely through even the darkest moments. Emma's insight and bravery had taught us that sometimes wisdom doesn't come with age. It comes from listening, observing, and acting when necessary. One evening, as the sun set over our quiet neighborhood, I sat with Emma and my husband on the porch. She clutched her notebook, but there was no fear in her eyes, only strength and confidence. I smiled and whispered, "You saved us, my dear. You reminded us to trust what we feel, even when the world seems ordinary." Emma grinned, her small hand squeezing mine. The chapter of fear and danger had closed, and a new one had begun. One of resilience, love, and the unshakable bond of family.